Hi everyone. This is going to be very different with very little astrology in it for once, but I just wanted to share some thoughts that have been rolling around my head, and I just thought some of them may be helpful for you. And please understand, I am not sitting here like Miss Prim saying I've cracked it all by a mile, but these are just things that have helped me along my journey so far, and I hope that some of them could help you. So just please take what resonates and leave the rest. And so we're very well aware we're in this massive crucible of change, and all around us we can see a lot of corruption coming to light, a lot of destruction of the environment, and it's very, very distressing indeed. But our job as the bridge builders are to say, okay, we have to see all this destruction, corruption, all that's been going on, because we can't build a more loving world on rotten foundations. And so, from that point, how can we understand how to better master our energy and together build a much more loving world? That's always my drum that I bang. And what I want to share with you today is something called the many worlds theory, because somebody recommended to me this absolute kind of doorstop by Vadim Zeland, who's a Russian philosopher, called Reality Transurfing. This is over 750 pages, so it's a weighty tome. And on the back, he says that transurfing is a powerful technology of managing reality. Apply it, and your life will begin to change under your order. So I'm going to share some of the very top line ideas he has in this, because this is really about stepping into our energetic mastery, because once we can master that, and also that's magnified, of course, in groups, we can also help the earth and nature to regenerate, because everything is connected. So in this book, and other people talk about it in their philosophies and books as well, is this idea of many worlds. Many worlds. And what Vadim says in here is that all possible worlds, all possible realities, past, present, future, are already created. They're already out there. So we don't have to actually create them. We simply have to choose them. Now, that's a much easier job than creating them. And just like you have to tweak the old-fashioned radio dial, we move that around until we get a frequency match. Everything in the universe is about a frequency match. It's about magnetic resonance. And so that becomes an easier task. Now, we are conditioned to think that there is only one reality. That's what the news conditions you to think. So we live in this kind of tunnel vision where only 3D exists, and we're kind of shoulders hunched against the world, where all we can see is the war and the misery and the suffering. And absolutely, that is out there. That is very clearly one timeline. No doubt about that. But it's not the only timeline. They are, as Dr. David Clement says, and many other people say, there are infinite numbers of timelines. And that's what Vadim is saying too. And the difference here with Vadim is saying they are already created. By the way, he was a very interesting character. He's quite a hermit, shunned publicity, didn't want to be interviewed. But I think his tome here is, magnus opus. And so what we have to learn to do, and this is very much at the core of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work as well, is to learn how to relax from that tight grip on your stories. He said, she said, he did to me, she did to me, our old identities, the tight definition of what our life has represented, because the more we can do that and shift from being mainly particle to more mainly wave, then we get more to the hub of the bicycle wheel, as I've often taught, this still point where the 3D definitions dissolve, and then we are much more able to choose from the hub of the wheel, that still point, that 0 point. But we've got to let the old stuff go. And David Clements talks about this at great length in all of his work. And Dr. Joe Dispenza also says, we've got to dissolve to the point in the meditations or the candle gazing or whichever method you choose of becoming no body, no thing to start to get back to the blueprint and then create a very different future. And I know time doesn't exist either, but, linked to a different frequency, let's say. And so it's interesting, about 20 years ago, I was following Dr. Joe Dispenza's work for many years. And I remember about 20 years ago, I was in a workshop with him in Denver, Colorado. And there was a lady right behind me. I remember it so clearly. She was called Susan. And in a previous workshop there, she went because she had stage 4 cancer that was very aggressive. And at the beginning of this workshop, she stood up and said, "I'd just like to announce that I am now completely cancer-free." And, people were crying, and it was, a really very emotional moment. And I remember distinctly Dr. Joe saying, "And is there still a Susan in another dimension with grade 4 cancer?" And that really stuck with me as being very important, because I think we do live in multiple realities. We're constantly shifting between realities, but possibly we have one dominant one, which is this one that I'm interacting with you here on that dimension. But I think what's also important is to know that the less reactive we are to outer circumstances, the freer we will be. Because if we're reacting to the news, the external events, and oh my God, it's gloom and doom, not only are we going to scatter our power, but we don't have that point of focus to create anything different, because we're very much on, the rubber hitting the road on the bicycle wheel. And it's very difficult to create anything different from there. We just create more chaos. We just create more panic, more fear. And something Vadim talks about in his book repeatedly is an attitude of no big deal. No big deal, because he believed that if we were really intense in our meditations, our intentions, etc., to, I really got to get this job, I really got to get this house, I really got to find this partner, it acts like a kind of resistance. It delays the process. Whereas if we relax into it and a kind of no big deal, it's already here, he says that is very helpful for this process of manifestation. And this has been revealing for me too, because I think in the past, myself included, I've shared this, that when we were manifesting, we were told we had to visualize very vividly, colorfully, and we had to have a sense of excitement. It's on its way, it's definitely coming. But through Vadim's work, and also I think Neville Goddard is somebody else I've been following recently, who was a real genius and mystic, and he died in 1972, but he wrote many books, and he has a YouTube channel that somebody's obviously constructed for him that I think is well worth listening to, because he has a similar idea of no big deal. And when we visualize ourselves, as I have done, and maybe you have done, in order to manifest, we so often visualize it out there. We see ourselves in a scene, opening up our new home or getting that job or winning the lottery or whatever it is. It's an out there visual projection. But if it's an out there projection, you're kind of pushing it constantly into the future. It never quite arrives. There's a sense of it's not quite here yet, so I've got to keep visualizing, but it never kind of quite arrives. And something I've found from Neville and Vadim is it's more powerful to actually live it as a memory. And that's very different. I've been trying this out myself, because if you live it as a memory, as say that scene you just did yesterday and the day before and the day before and the week before, etc., it helps to get the frequency integrated in your cells. So let's say you want to live on a beautiful tropical island. If it's a visual, you tend to be, as I say, constantly seeing yourself out there in the visual, but not in here. And the key thing is about developing our own internal spiritual technology. So the living it as a memory helps to integrate it into every cell of your body. So let's say if you want to live on a beautiful tropical island, you remember that very fine, warm sand between your toes. and you're looking out to the sea, which is absolutely sparkling with beautiful sunlight. The sky is a piercing clear blue. You can hear the lapping of the waves. You can smell the tropical blossoms all around you. You remember walking down to the sea. You remember going into it and how warm and clear and clean and beautiful it is. You remember looking beneath the surface and seeing all the iridescent tropical fish. You remember how you kind of drop into bliss and out of time. You remember coming out and some loving partner puts a big warm towel around you and gives you a hug. You remember going up the old sea wash steps, the wooden steps, up to a fabulous fresh fruit breakfast. You remember. So whatever you're trying to visualize, to do it as a memory, I've actually recently discovered I think is much more powerful. So just again, take what resonates, leave the rest. And I think it's also very important to see everything with really clear focus. I think one of the ways we've lived, well, all of our lives, frankly, is like, again, going back to the old-fashioned radio analogy, it's like constantly having interference, static on the radio, or watching a television channel where there's constant interference. We've had a muddy, dirty windscreen. Things we have not lived with clean focus. It just hasn't been possible because we're so inundated by so much information and signals that just aren't helpful. So I'm also learning that something I've talked about quite a lot recently, that attention and focus are as important as intention. The intention that you set, whatever that is super important, but so is the attention and the focus. And that kind of acts like the prow of a boat plowing through the sea. That's your compass needle, and you're not diverted. You don't keep swinging the wheel of the boat. If you're in charge of the boat, you're the skipper, you have to keep a complete total focus on the prow of the boat so you won't go astray. And even think of the old camping way of lighting fire was to focus sunlight through glass, and that would ignite fire. So the focus is incredibly important, and that brings in a kind of energetic coherence with it. And I've talked in recent videos about the importance of whatever you want to manifest, hold that frequency like an opera singer holds a note. And you just hold it, and you don't wobble about. Opera singer is outstanding at being able to hold a note on the same frequency for literally a musical frequency for a long period. And therefore, it's very coherent. And coherence is a huge part of all of this too. And I think the reason we don't manifest instantly, we meditate and then, hey presto, and sometimes that happens. I've seen it happen again in Dr. Joe workshops, where at the end of a very long meditation, I look around and miracles have happened. So it can happen, but I think more day to day for us, we have to build the stability of the frequency. We start to build it with one meditation, and then we build and build over days and weeks. And the more we can hold the stability and the coherence of that frequency, the more things will just start to pop in. They can often be quite comical, actually, because I think the universe has a great sense of humor. But little synchronicities pop in to kind of give you signals that you are on the right path to wherever you're headed. You might, if you're thinking of the tropical island, you might turn to a page in a book somebody's just given you, and there's your scene of the tropical island that you've been remembering. And so little synchronicity and signs, and that kind of gives you feedback that you're on your way. But we have to, once we've held that note, that frequency for a period of time, so it is stable enough. And of course, this is even better in big groups. Our daily meditation, this is so much better in big groups because the energy is magnified. Then that frequency is stable enough to shift into the completed reality that Vadim talks about, but also for other matter and manifestation to start to collect around that frequency. I mean, this is quantum physics. This is where consciousness starts to create matter. And, there's 10 tons of evidence out there about that. And so But when we are in this 3D contracted reality, there is no other option. You know, we've got this tunnel vision, there is no other option. So I think one of the really big differences, and I'm often asked this, as many people are, one of the really big differences between third dimensional reality and higher dimensions is three-dimensional reality always has an external focus. It looks outwards to the news, to the scary headlines, to waiting for the next political party to win, the next leader, the next, it'll be fine when XYZ happens. If you only can get that sorted, it'll be fine. But as a constant external reference to something that you are not working on as your own inner focus and spiritual technology, because the thing about the higher dimensions is that we are working from our own inner focus, the hub of the wheel, the meditation, the silence, the still point, the holding the coherence of the frequency. It's coming from within us. And actually life then becomes so much simpler because you've got a one-pointed focus as opposed to a million focuses out there. And it also helps you to consciously choose. You start to live much more consciously because you're aware that you are actually creating your reality to some degree. And that gets stronger and stronger. And, I'm becoming more aware of the role that the dwarf planets have in this. And they really are helping us to live at a higher octave, because I think Salacia, and we've talked about Salacia many times, of the shimmering sunlight and moonlight on the sea, but I increasingly believe she is this loving liquid light, this intelligent light, which is coming onto Earth and to humanity, giving us higher frequency cosmic ingredients for our evolution. And that's an incredibly precious opportunity for us to be welcoming them in and assimilating them, even though physically that might be quite uncomfortable at times. And so all through my day, I will find times to say, let me embody more light today. Show me how to embody more light today, as we are gradually moving towards the light body. And so that's Salacia. And with Kwawa, in thinking about doing this video today, I thought Kwawa is all about the shift from the outer to the inner, because in the myth of Kwawa, it begins in chaos. And the whole myth is don't create from the chaos, and a price has to be paid for the chaos. But shift to a higher state of being, a high frequency, a high coherence, before you set your intention and attention on manifesting. And it really occurred to me today that what Kwawa's mythology is about is shifting from the outer to the inner, to living from the inside out, not the outside in. I think that's part of the mythology. And also catch your words. There's a phrase that your words are your wands. And I think words are really powerful. I talked quite a few months ago about somebody helped me by saying, have a delete key. And my delete phrase, as I shared, is fun and freedom. So I don't say many negative words these days. I've kind of trained myself and caught myself with that. But I still have the occasional negative thought. And when I do, I'll say fun and freedom. And that instantly kind of lifts my frequency. And it's quite fun. Other people just have love or joy, or, you choose whatever your delete key is. But it's helpful if you use that delete key continuously, because then it starts to develop power in itself. But words have power because words are the next step on from your thinking. And if your thoughts are thinking, your feelings are thinking, the words are the end result of any negative thoughts and feelings. And so that's another building block towards manifestation. So, this is part of our mastery as well, I think. And so what use is astrology in the midst of all of that? It's a question I'm always asking myself. What use is astrology? Because yes, absolutely, I do think there are infinite numbers of timelines. I absolutely do, because if there was only one timeline, nobody would ever change their life radically. Everybody would be stuck in 3D forever and ever and ever. And we all know people who've made some radical and fabulous changes in their lives. So other realities must exist, other timelines must exist. And what I think astrology does for us, it takes it from the level of infinite possibilities to the next level of probability streams. At any prevailing moment, astrology offers us the probability streams because of the prevailing planetary patterns. So it helps to guide us a little bit about what is more likely if you follow this particular flow. You've got the cosmic winds with you. It will be easier than if you have, very challenging aspects like a Saturn Pluto or Saturn square Pluto that's more difficult. So it helps us to live strategically, and astrology also helps us to give focal points and also explanation of your frequency latitude. And let me explain what I mean by that. I talked about this quite a lot in my first book, actually. Let's take one very simple example of planet Neptune, which has a 165-year orbit, and let's say that's coming conjunct to somebody's Mercury. It's been smack on my Mercury all this year. So that's a big deal, because that's a once in a lifetime transit, 165 years. Now, at a lower level of expression, and astrology is super helpful in explaining the lower level expression, that can be you start to become a bit confused, a bit muddled, your memory's going a little bit, you're in a bit of a fog, more, a little more forgetful, losing a bit of confidence perhaps in your mental abilities. Mercury's about the mind, your day-to-day thinking. Or if you understand the astrology, you will know that is absolutely fabulous for your imagination, for your creativity. I've known several people in their 50s start to suddenly produce beautiful art or write poetry, and they'd never done that before under this transit. It could offer you a much richer dream life, certainly much greater psychic sensitivity, a connecting to the oneness of all things and other living beings. And it can also bring in a sense of philanthropy or charity. And of course, I've just started up Pam Gregory Giving. We're going to be using all the net proceeds to donate to the 5 chosen charities that we have right now. So the astrology doesn't dictate, it actually explains a wider range of choice. It gives you a wider vocabulary to live your life by and to consciously choose the positive expression rather than just sink into the negative expression, which if you didn't understand the astrological language, you might be more prone to do. So it's a really, really useful language, even from that practical point of view. I hope I'm being clear here and being, very elementary, really. But I'm very strong in astrology increases your choices, not reduces them. And it helps you live more consciously. And so, just finally, I want to share, and please, again, take what resonates and leave the rest. My own practice, I have many practices through the day, but for instance, before I even open my eyes in the morning, I'll go through a gratitude list, and I'll try and make that a little bit different every day, but it might be, I'm grateful for fresh water. I'm grateful that my pillow is soft. I'm grateful that, I've had a comfortable sleep. I'm grateful I can hear bird song. Really simple things. I'm grateful I have eyesight, because I'd certainly miss it if I didn't. You might be grateful for family or friends, whatever it is. I always have a gratitude list, and I do that in the evening as I'm falling asleep too. I go through the wonderful Blossom Goodchild mantra, I'm the light, I'm the love, I'm the truth I am. And I also say, I am that I am that I am. I also say, I love in peace, love and bliss. And of course, you can change those words to whatever, you want to change it to joy, love and bliss. I also say, I choose to live today in love, or I choose to live today in joy. I choose to live today in kindness. And I'll set that as my intention for that day. And I will try and be, on track with whatever it is. If it's kindness, I will try and go out of my way to help neighbors and, take them shopping or, whatever, walk their dog, which I do regularly, whatever it is. And I also say, and I'm now saying this several times a day, I am the creator of my reality. I am the creator of my reality. And really have that sense of sovereignty, which I've talked so endlessly about recently with all the Aries planets. I am the creator of my reality, and it helps you it helps to remind you to live from the inside out, not the outside in. You know, you don't just wake up, think, oh, you know, I've got a massive to-do list, spring out of bed, switch on your phone, you know, stuff is pouring in at you, which it is for all of us these days. Oh my goodness, you know, I've forgotten that person, and oh goodness, I'm late on that. You know, you start from a scattered point of view. So those are the things I do before I open my eyes. Now, is my life perfect? No, but it is way better, unrecognizably better than it was for many, many years, for all kinds of scary horrors and illness and blah, blah, blah. And it started to get better about 20 years ago. I left my marriage, and since then, my health has got better. My life has got better. No, it's not perfect. Do we still have challenges ahead? For sure we do. We absolutely have challenges ahead. We're always going to have that because they're the grit in the oyster. But in mastering your own energy and your own reality, and these are really, really simple, free ways to do it that I'm suggesting today, if more and more of us do that, then we can start to calm down the seismic activity and calm down the extremes of you know, the Earth's labor pains that she's going through. She's going through her own rebirth. And we can start to work in harmony with her and understand what nature needs to regenerate. You know, it's a very different, I think, really beautiful, conscious spiritual way to live. And you know, as I said, I'm not sitting here like Miss Prim. I've got so much to learn, and you know, many people are way, way, way ahead of me. But I just offer this as simple ways that we can navigate these massive times of transformation. We are absolutely in the crucible. And, you know, we still have, I think, some big earth changes to come. Luckily, so far, apart from the catastrophes in Venezuela, they have largely, the earthquake's been away from major population centers. There are many, you know, very superactive volcanoes right now. You know, the earth is rebirthing. But I hope this has helped you, and dismiss all of it if, you know, nothing resonates. But, you know, try and live by this principle of starve out the scary, love in the good, and operate from your inner radio dial. And just very slowly and gradually, day by day, life might get a little bit easier. God bless. Hope it's helped. I'll be back with some real astrology soon. God bless. Bye for now.